Hi, I'm Paul. For this video, I'm going to try and talk about the difference between consciousness and thoughts, and how we find ourselves drifting, and trying to point out how to recognize the difference between living in the space of thoughts and living in the space of consciousness or awareness. And when I talk about thoughts, what I'm more pointing to is getting carried away with thoughts. Because regardless of how awake or aware you are, thoughts will always still happen. But what I'm pointing to is the attachment to thoughts, where you get carried away and drift into a thought process, leaving awareness behind and becoming unaware. So firstly, if we try to understand what awareness is, or consciousness is, and then what thoughts are, there was an analogy that I used a while ago. And the analogy was, if you imagine you have a plant pot, and the plant pot's full of soil. The soil itself is infinite, ever present, never changing. And when I say infinite, I don't mean there's an infinite amount of soil. I just refer infinite to, no matter what happens, that soil will always infinitely be soil. And let's just say some plants grow out of the soil. They're finite. One plant can come now and then die away, and then another plant, and then that plant can die away. And I'm referring these plants in the soil to being like thoughts. Thoughts come and thoughts go. But consciousness awareness is like the infinite soil. The awareness will always stay as awareness. So firstly, if we say, where do thoughts come from? And I think this is quite simple to say, that thoughts come from awareness, from consciousness. We could say that thoughts and ideas, emotions, desires, wishes, wants, are all the contents of consciousness. So let's just say all of these we could call the plants in the garden of consciousness. So if we take a look at the thoughts, perhaps we could ask, can thoughts be aware of themselves? If we just pick one individual thought and just stick with that thought, can that thought be aware of that thought? Without creating just another thought? And if you create another thought, can that thought alone be aware of that thought? In my opinion, thoughts can't be aware of themselves. If we ask the same question about consciousness, awareness, can awareness be aware of itself? So if you can go back to just your awareness without any thoughts and just be aware, recognize the awareness, can that awareness be aware of itself? And in my opinion, it can't. I would say that whatever awareness can be aware of has to be the contents of awareness. The plants in the garden of awareness. Like I said before, if we have any experience of anything, then there has to be an experiencer of that experience. If we have a thought, there has to be a thought and an experiencer. So if awareness is only awareness, and whatever comes out of awareness, like thoughts, is only the contents of awareness, if we move this to, let's say, a more complicated thought process, let's say jealousy, if we have a moment of jealousy, which I'm sure many of us will have had, then what tends to happen with us is we have this moment of unease, and then we quickly run away from it. So let's say this unease is a weed in the garden of consciousness. And let's just say we have this moment of discomfort and we don't like it. So we end up clinging on to thoughts. So let's say the jealousy was somebody drove past in a really good car and this triggered off jealousy. And we want to run away from that jealousy, which is in us. Then we start saying, well, I bet the owner of the car's an idiot. It's not that good of a car anyway. And notice how we then cling on to this thought process of trying to block out the feeling of jealousy and run away from it, try to destroy it externally. Well, if we do this, we're just kind of running away from the weed in consciousness and leaving it to grow. And the idea of self-inquiry is when this jealousy arrives, we just stay with the jealousy. We don't have to unpack it. We don't have to discover why it makes us feel horrible. We just have to look at it, stay with the uncomfort, face it. Try to understand it. Try to accept it. Sometimes other things might crop up at the same time when we're observing the jealousy. And that's okay. Then follow that. And once you've followed that, when the jealousy crops up again, go back to that. If you start thinking, trying to run away from the jealousy, making excuses, then that's great. Stay with that. And when I say stay with that, what I'm talking about is the awareness stays with that. And the awareness itself is just the observer of the uneasy feeling, of the thoughts that are trying to run away. And like I said, that if you have this thought process of where you start making excuses and start to run away, if you stay with awareness, you can watch the thoughts running away. Just watch them. And that means that you're not clinging on to the thoughts and going into unawareness or into the dream of the thought process. But you're staying in awareness, just watching the thoughts happen. And that's the general idea of self-inquiry. Thanks so much for listening.